fine.
Hello everybody, welcome to another edition of What's Going On. I'm your host, Tom D'Ambra. As always, we are very thankful you took the time from your busy day to join us. My friends, we have a lot of information to go through with you in this one quick hour, so why don't we get right to it. First of all, I hope you all went and paid your extortion fee that you know is property taxes. And you must be wondering, gee, why do we have to pay these property taxes? How is it that if I own my land, I have to pay these property taxes? Anyway, my friends, we are going to get into that. That is going to be the main subject of our material today. We are going to explain to you through law, through the documents that created this situation, why you do not own your land, what is your standing in of your land, and also what goes on with the taxpayer and property taxes. But before we get into that, I do want to cover some ground with you. Obviously, Russia has had major success battling ISIS or ISIL or the Islamic State, whatever you want to call it this week. In the short time that they have been engaged in ISIS, they actually have taken out all their command and control centers. ISIS is now in a full retreat to the border of Iraq. And you have to ask yourself, you think the U.S. government would be applauding Russia for stopping this evil terrorist group? Well, the United States is very upset by this, and they should be. After all, the United States has invested hundreds of millions of dollars into these fragmented organizations, these agent provocateurs. If you don't believe me, we've covered this on the show many times, but we actually had senators on the Senate floor saying, why are we funding Al-Qaeda? We are ISIS. So what you've got to understand, my friends, is our military that inept that they could not find these command and control centers of the ISIS organization? No. Our pilots, our avionics are outstanding. They could have easily taken all of this infrastructure out, but they were not bombing ISIS and ISIL or Al-Qaeda, whatever you want to call it this week. They were bombing the military infrastructure, command and communications of the various countries that we have placed these organizations in. Libya, Iraq, Syria, the Ukraine, and so forth. So you have to understand, my friends, that the reason why Senator John Insane McCain came out and said that, hey, the United States should give ISIS or ISIL, again, whatever you want to call it this week, these shoulder-launched missiles so they can shoot down the Russian aircraft. Think about what that would bring in as World War III. But the reason why he wanted to do that is because we are ISIS. We funded, founded, and financed and give the marching orders to this organization. Doesn't matter what they call it this week. They only do that for you, the ignorant Americans. The rest of the world is very much aware that all these organizations are formed and financed through the United States, through the international bankers. So I applaud Russia for what they're doing. I do not like to see harm come to any people. But when you look at what is going on with ISIS or ISIL, like I said, whatever you want to call it, they're evil. They are murdering women and children. There is no sense of bringing, quote unquote, democracy to these different countries. Syria, by the way, my friends, has done, before the United States got involved there, has done very, very well. Assad had higher election positive returns than Obama or any congressman that I know of. So understand that the reason why the United States is not applauding Russia's move is because Russia is hurting an organization that the United States put in place to take down a legitimate elected government in a foreign country that has not struck or threatened to strike the United States in any manner, militarily, economic, or anything along that line. If you remember, General Petraeus, or as I call him, Betraeus, spoke that there, about 4 or 5 years ago, that there were 7 countries that the United States was going to go into. and all but two we have been successful with, and the Russians have put a stop in one of the countries that was mentioned by General Petraeus, and that was the country of Syria. So I applaud Vladimir Putin. He's been very, very patient. He understands the stakes that are here, but he also knows that he had told the United States to keep the ISIS people, because Putin knows that we were in control of them and are in control of them, to not engage the Russian military bases that are throughout Syria. Well, ISIS did. They engaged the Russian military bases, and ironically enough, it appears that ISIS is just nothing but a bunch of murdering thugs, because when they actually engaged in a trained professional military unit, the Russian military, they didn't fare so well. So they are on the run. They are on the run to Iraq, and the reason why they are doing that is because that's an international border, and also that Putin has said from the get-go that basically that he wanted to get them out of Syria because of what they were doing. They were murdering the people and taking over Russian military hardware in the bases that he would not allow to be taken over. So why is ISIS running to Iraq? Well, because we put them in Iraq. We control Iraq. And that international border, if Putin does decide to go beyond that border, obviously the United States, which has lost all the high ground in the eyes of the world, may have some sort of cause in that now we have to engage Russia because they are across an international border. Of course, they won't speak about the borders that we've engaged with, including Iraq, and taken the country over and balkanized it. But again, the ignorant American people, you fell for weapons of mass destruction. You fell for the USS Maddox. You fell for 9/11. You fall for the vaccines. You fall for the chemtrails. You fall for the disinformation program that William Casey spoke about so well when he said, we will know when our disinformation program is complete and a success, when everything the American people believe is false. Well, I will tell you, we have come to that plateau. Okay, a couple of quick articles, my friends. This is a very interesting article written by Mark Anderson of the American Free Press. And the article headline is People Demand Bank Reform. I'm just going to read this verbatim to you. This is out of Reading, Pennsylvania. Americans from around the country converged on this struggling Eastern Pennsylvania city on September 25th to demand banking reforms as part of a national protest organized by the grassroots group Americans for Banking Reform, or ABR. American Free Press was on hand to monitor the growing public awareness of the appalling monetary mischief carried out routinely by central and commercial banks. AFP spoke with ABR founder Mickey Paoletta at the rally to understand just how deceitful the financial system has become in its ceaseless quest to create a nation of paupers ruled by the plutocratic minority kept in power by deception. Could not agree more. As Henry Ford said so well, my friends, it is well the American people do not understand their money system, for if they did, I fear there would be revolution by morning. And I will tell you, the bankers are worried that you are starting to figure out the game. We have gone over the tools of the game, if you would, through the two shows that we did on the document Money Mechanics that was put out by the Chicago Federal Reserve Bank to teach the upper echelon of their banking elite the fraudulent banking system that we are under. And we'll get into that a little bit to explain what they're upset about. ABR's goal involves defeating the fraudulent money and credit machine in court, case by case, under a workable plan in which loans are invalidated based on the documents and literature of the banking system, whose sensitive internal banking ledgers show that banks neither loan their money nor their customers' money. Eventually, the groups want to replace the Federal Reserve and its private debt notes with public interest-free money. Now, there was another president who tried to do the very same thing. His name was President John F. Kennedy. Look what happened to him. Abraham Lincoln, look what happened to him. Garfield, look what happened to him. McKinley, look what happened to him. They were all assassinated. Now, you have to understand, my friends, and I know we've gone over this, and I'm going to be real quick what they're talking about. When you go to a bank to get a loan, they are not lending you money from an account. They're not even lending you their credit. What they are lending you is your promise to pay. And stay with me, because I'm going to be real quick about this. You go into the bank and you want to take out a mortgage for 100,000 Federal Reserve notes, because we don't have dollars no more, my friends. The dollars have been taken. There is no gold, there is no silver backing your medium of exchange. You do not have dollars. As we've said to you many, many times, a dollar is 25.8 grains of gold and a 15-to-1 ratio of silver. You have neither. You have a debt instrument called the Federal Reserve note. And that's what the debt is all about. Because when they give the Treasury permission to print these Federal Reserve notes, there is an interest bond due on every one of them. So if you print one note and then you print 2 other notes to cover that interest, well, now you've got to print 6 more notes to cover the interest on the original 3, and so forth and so forth. It's perpetual debt. As the statement about Joseph Stomp, the former president of the Bank of London, saying it was the greatest sleight of hand ever developed. Well, the sleight of hand, my friends, is like a dirty card trick that the people at the table don't see. Where you're sitting at the table and this is being done right in front of you. And what this organization is trying to do is bring the attention to the American people. Just like this program. Myself and the people behind the camera are trying to educate the American people, however little segment that are viewing us, about the fraudulent no money system. Not the fraudulent money system, because we do not have money. How do we know we don't have money? From our Black's 4th edition, because money does not encompass debt. What's a note? An acknowledgement of debt. So you have got to understand, when you go to a bank and you take out this mortgage, death pledge, or you take out a loan for an automobile, what they are writing a check on is your promise to pay. Because everything in our system is a note. It's an instrument of debt. So you promise to pay X amount of Federal Reserve notes at a certain term and a certain interest and a certain principal value. So the bank takes your promise to pay and puts it on their ledger entries as an asset, and then cuts you a check with your promise to pay. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? And I know people get confused by when I say to them, we're on a 2% fractional banking system. And people will ask me, well, Tom, that can't be. And what do you mean by a 2% fractional banking system? What I mean is that the Federal Reserve mandates that for every dollar of liability on the ledgers for these banking institutions, they have to have 2% or 2 cents, if you would, of an asset to back it. So it was interesting back during Y2K when Chairman Alan Greenspan of the Federal Reserve says, well, worst case scenario, we estimate that only 2% of the American people will draw their funds out of the banking system in America. Guess what he was telling you? He was telling you that they estimate in the worst case scenario only 2%, because there's only 2% of hard assets there to take out of the banks in the first place. There's nothing there. It's ledger entries. It's digital computer entries. It's fraud. You're being lied to. Your lives are being controlled through this deception that this organization is speaking of. That's what they're speaking of. Let us continue. Now, another interesting thing here, eventually the group wants to replace the Federal Reserve, which is a private for-profit banking corporation. We've gone over that many times with you. And its private debt notes. Why is it private debt notes? Because it's a private corporation with public public interest-free money. In other words, you won't be paying this interest bond on every one of these so-called dollars, which are Federal Reserve notes, because they gave the Treasury permission to print it. Every congressman that has signed on to the Federal Reserve Act from December 23rd of 1913 should be put up on treason. Treason. And how come when you watch these dog and pony shows at these debates, how come this is never brought up? Because it is the impetus, it is the root of the problem of the control mechanism of these private bankers that are not only bleeding our nation, they're bleeding the world for that matter. And your sons and daughters, when someone doesn't want to go along with the Ponzi scheme, they put pretty uniforms on your sons and daughters, they sell this cause to you, and then they go and bleed for their profit. And you allow this to go on. Wave the flag. Wave the flag. That flag has nothing to do, my friends, with what our nation is going on. The handling of our government, actually it's their government, it's not our government, is not done by the red, white, and blue. It's done by a bunch of private banking firms, Federal Reserve banking firms, the Euro, the International Monetary Fund, the Bank of International Settlements. That's who owns your land. We're going to get into that. Let us continue here. As the rally commenced, Pastor Wayne Sedlak, who is involved in an especially rigorous case helping his wife, Laura Sedlak, ward off an attempted foreclosure of their Wisconsin home, and he spoke to the crowd. Sedlak told the protesters, "My case in Wisconsin could itself be a study in the failure of America's judiciary and its love affair with the banking industry. Imagine being presented with not one, not two, but four completely different original loan notes presented in different courts over 5 years, yet all declared to be the same original note. Imagine being faced with witnesses who assume another's identity, signatures forged, judges who bury evidence, courts that discard historic legal precedents and discard rules of evidence." My friends, I'll tell you something. That paragraph right there sums up the just us system from A to Z right there. And I'm going to read that over to you. I want to read this over to you because every word this pastor's speaking here is fact. Fact. Our courts are not for the people. The laws are meant to keep the little people little. It's the just us system, and you're not part of the us. Imagine being faced with witnesses who assume another's identity, signatures forged, judges who bury evidence, courts that discard historic legal precedent and discard rules of evidence. Absolutely true. I've seen it so many times. Consider the note the collector swore in open court was original, that was declared by an independent forensic and signature expert approved by the court to not have the signature of the real Laurie Sedlak, but a signature created by experts using techniques at the level of the CIA. Banks have manuals teaching collectors how to forge documents for courts. Let me read that again to you. Banks have manuals teaching collectors how to forge documents for courts. Now, you and I do that, we're going bye-bye. They do that, it's accepted evidence. Because the courts are controlled by these bankers. These judges know very well this is all fraud, but they've got to keep you in this commercial veil. They've got to maintain that status quo of this fraudulent activity against the American people because guess what? Their paycheck, their retirement, their honorary status, all of that is based on lies. Lies and fraudulent actions. So understand that. we, the Sedlaks, got hold of one. This is the norm in the courts, and thousands of people are being defrauded daily by these kinds of tactics of the collectors. The time is now for people to stand against the corruption. I totally agree. Paoletta announced at the rally that ABR stands ready to help anyone who has fallen under the heel of the banks and needs relief. This involves challenging the very notion that banks make loans at all. They do not make loans. You create the asset for the loan, and they create a check for you, taking it out of an account to another account. No, they create it by making your promise to pay an asset. I'll read that again. This involves challenging the very notion that banks make loans at all. A critical point that ABR has successfully used in the courts to nullify more than 750 mortgages and credit card debts when the banks move to foreclose or collect. Now, I am not promoting this organization, but if you wish for more information on this, because we only have a short time with you, you can reach ABR at 717-503-6903. Now I'm going to give you a minute because this is important, my friends, to get this information. It's one thing to hear it from me, a person you don't know, even though I've read this to you from the Money Mechanics document, from Black's Law Dictionary, from many law books that we have out, that we've put out over the years here. But get a hold of this organization. Understand they have been successful over 750 times in nullifying the fraud. 717-503-6903. Please contact them. I think you'll be very, very impressed with, number one, their knowledge, and number two, their determination. My friends, the noose that is around our necks is the financial system, and I'm talking about at the personal level to the national level. It is the noose around our necks. It is the financial or lack of money system, as I say, that is the impetus of the hangman. Okay, let us continue with some quick spurts of news here. DEA totally corrupted. The daily newspaper USA Today reports on newly disclosed records that show Drug Enforcement Administration has been allowing its employees to remain, you ready for this, unfired, even after they have been caught distributing illegal drugs. Now, we're not just talking about selling a bag of pot here, guys. We're talking about monstrous amounts of heroin and cocaine. The stuff you gave up your rights to stop coming into the country. Your liberties. Unfired even after they have been caught distributing illegal drugs, lying to authorities, committing other serious misconduct. This finding comes on top of the sex parties that agents have going on in Colombia, which we told you about. Also, the Secret Service was involved with that, and a senator named Mendez, I think he's out of New Jersey, who was caught with 8 and 12-year-old girls. 8 and 12-year-old girls. That's okay. He's a senator, right? Prima nocta. He's all set. Provided by to Colombia, which were provided to them by drug cartels. Of the 50 employees recommended by the DEA's Internal Board of Professional Conduct to be fired, only 13 were actually terminated. Next article. Tensions boiled over at the county commissioner's confirm in St. Louis, Colorado, with a shouting match breaking out between a growing number of residents who want to live off the grid and police as the county pushed its agenda of banning, you ready for this? Camping on one's own private property. Well, I have a problem with this statement. Your property is not private. You do not own it. The Bank of International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland owns your land. This is why you have to pay your extortion fee by tomorrow here in the state of Vermont. Because if you don't pay it, representatives of these international bankers will either lien it or take it. The establishment seeks to force homesteaders to get onto the grid. We've been regulated out of life, Robin Rutan told Colorado Public Radio. I came here because I couldn't live by the codes in other regions. It's part of a pattern of nationwide whereby zoning officials are in cases threatening citizens with jail time for collecting rainwater or not hooking into utilities. It is estimated that nearly 200,000 families live off the grid in the United States. My friends, if you can produce your own food, your own electricity, your own clean water, guess what the bankers lose? They lose control of you. Why do you think they're mandating vaccinations? They know very well the vaccinations don't work. They know very well there's cancer agents, mercury, thimerosal, all these other things, fluoride, all these other things in the vaccinations. It's about making you sick. It's about control. They do not want a vibrant, healthy, sovereign, educated, fact-finding, truth-seeking people. They want an ill, ignorant, apathetic, cowardly people. Which are you? Now, I live off the grid, my wife and I. We produce our own clean water. We produce a majority of our own food. None of it GMO, thank you very much. All of it organic. Same with my neighbor. You realize if we were living in the state of Colorado or other states, that they could actually come and force us to tie into the utilities so we can pay them to do that and pay them every month? Why? Because then they make a profit on us and they have control. Let's go on. Michelle and Marcilla Cruz had to find refuge in Mexico from the oppression of Western Idaho's Kern County Sheriff's Department. It all started when the couple were forced to endure a violent paramilitary-style SWAT attack on August 16th on their farm in tiny Letha, Idaho. Their crime? Being potentially, listen to this now, dangerous constitutionalist. During the arrest process, deputies failed to identify themselves and kicked Michael in the knee. The peace officers hoped to find marijuana growing so they could seize the couple's house and assets, but were disappointed when the hoped-for pot plants turned out to be organic tomatoes. Unbelievable. Busted. White Helmets, one of the largest non-governmental organizations operating in Syria, is funded by slash and burn speculator George Soros. Now, if you remember, George Soros, and we read this to you last year, came out and said they have spent, I forget the exact figure, but it was in the hundreds of millions of dollars in operations in Syria and the Ukraine. The group was recently busted posting a fake photo of a young girl who was supposedly wounded by a Russian fighter jet that are bombing, let's listen to this, U.S.-backed rebels and terrorists. Interesting statement. Who's backing the rebels and the terrorists? The United States. The problem for the Soros-backed organization was that the photo was actually taken weeks before Russia started its bombing campaign. Brazilian democracy. In stark contrast to the United States, the Supreme Court of Brazil, by an 8-3 vote, has banned as unconstitutional corporate donations to political campaigns. Brazilian Supreme Court Justice Rosa Weber said, now listen to these words. The influence of the economic power has ended up transforming the electoral process into a rigged political game. A despicable plutonium that makes the voter a puppet. simultaneously undermining the citizenship, democracy, and popular sovereignty. Now, do you think it's different in the United States? No. The Supreme Court of the United States said, go ahead, give them all the money you want. Don't worry about it. Doesn't affect the electoral process at all. On the same day that the Obama, this is called hypocrite, on the same day that the Obama called for curtailing American citizens' Second Amendment rights, the president authorized yet another shipment of weapons to terrorists in Syria who are fighting the legitimate government of Bashar al-Assad. This is the same guy that blew up the hospital in Afghanistan. And I have done more research on that because I am a big fan of the organization Doctors Without Borders. I happen to know 2 doctors personally that take time out of their own pockets and their own and risk, go around the world in very hostile environments and participate in, hopefully, in the healing process of millions of people that have been wounded by the actions of these international bankers. And I am very upset that the United States admittingly blew up this hospital. And when they didn't apologize for nothing, the United States says that they did it because there were terrorists in the hospital. Are they the same terrorists that you've been funding? The United States? Let us continue. Tennessee Lieutenant Governor Ron Ramsey said on October 2nd that fellow Christians, boy, I'm surprised they didn't censor him for saying the word Christians, should consider getting a handgun permit to protect themselves. Ramsey said the recent spat of mass shootings around the nation targeting Christians and the defenders of the West is truly troubling. He wrote on his Facebook page, "I have always believed that it is better to have a gun and not need it than to need a gun and not have it. Our enemies are armed. We must do likewise." I applaud you, Tennessee Lieutenant Governor Ron Ramsey. Very, very well done, and I completely agree with you. Okay, my friends, we're going to get into this little quick thing here. Sarah Hirschberger, who's a 12-year-old, is now cancer-free thanks to alternative medical treatments. Where did she get these alternative medical treatments? After fleeing government agents who wanted to kidnap her and force her to continue with chemotherapy that her loving Amish parents were convinced was making her condition worse. In June of 2013, Sarah was receiving chemo treatment at the Arkin Children's Hospital in Ohio, which is owned by the government. The family had to flee the country so Sarah could have herbal therapy instead of the chemicals. Authorities insist she would die within a year without the toxic drugs. Well, this was in 2013, my friends. I am very happy to report that this young lady is now completely cancer-free and doing very well. And we thank God for that. And we also thank the parents for their courage to take control and not succumb to these different agencies. I mean, you think about that, my friends. They say you got rights. You don't have the rights to treat your children or yourself with methods that you deem adequate. You don't even, according to the government, have the right to know if what toxins are in your food because you don't have the right to know if it's GMO or not. Come on. Now, speaking of cancer, this was written by Natural News. Mike Adams, unbelievable scam of cancer industry blown wide open. $100 billion a year spent on toxic chemotherapy for many fake diagnoses. National Cancer Institute's shocking admission affects millions of patients. I have always told you, cancer is part of the soft kill program. Cancer is a major moneymaker. Big-time moneymaker. Like I told you, they don't want you a vibrant, healthy person. They want you an ill-dependent person. Why do you think, as we read to you, was it last week or 2 or 3 weeks ago, that over So we don't know the actual number, but over 98 million Americans through the polio vaccination. Not only we're getting polio, as one gentleman who just won a $22 million lawsuit, which if we have the time we'll get into, because his daughters got the polio vaccination, and the polio was passed through their fecal matter when he cleaned their daughters and received the polio disease itself. Do you remember some years ago we were talking about vaccinations, and we read to you, this was actually comical, how they changed the definition of polio? Do you remember that? Because people were actually getting polio from the polio vaccine. So what'd they do? They changed the definition of polio. Sort of reminds me when Fukushima took place and all the radiations everywhere, what'd they do? They just raised the acceptable levels of radiation, no problem. Because this is what you base your life on, right? Not how you feel, because they said this is okay, so this is okay now. It wasn't okay yesterday before Fukushima took place, but it's okay now, so by some miracle now it's just fine. And you people accept that. You accept that. With $100 billion a year now being spent on toxic chemotherapy treatments. Let's stop right there. Do you remember some time ago when we were talking about vaccines? What was it? Was it 85% of oncologists would not do chemo and radiation if they had cancer? Remember that survey? We read it to you verbatim. 85% would not do chemo and radiation. But what's that very same doctor telling you to do? Go get the chemo and radiation. Why? He's actually worse than a drug pusher on the street. Because most drug pushers do the drugs that they push. But the doctors don't. Let us continue. With $100 billion a year now being spent on toxic chemotherapy treatments that damage patients and cause chemo brain side effects, a panel of cancer experts commissioned by the National Cancer Institute publicly admitted that tens of millions of cancer cases aren't cancer at all. Tens of millions of people who have been diagnosed with cancer by crooked oncologists and scared into medically unadjusted but extremely profitable chemotherapy treatments never had any sort of life-threatening condition to begin with, scientists have confirmed. The word cancer often invokes the specter of inexorably lethal process. However, cancers are heterogeneous and can follow multiple paths, not all of which progress to metastasis and death, and include indolent disease that cause no harm during the patient's lifetime, said the abstract of the published study entitled Overdiagnosis and Overtreatment in Cancer, an Opportunity for Improvement. The article goes on to explain that many tissue lesions in human biology are being diagnosed with scary-sounding term cancer, even though they would not lead to any harm in the body, even if left untreated. $100 billion a year generated by the cancer industry to treat many patients who never had real cancer in the first place. Oncologists and the breast cancer industry, listen to his words, of these scientists, prey on the systemic overdiagnosis of cancer in order to scare patients into unnecessary treatments. These treatments are hoping to generate over $100 billion a year in chemotherapy revenues, often for so-called cancers that shouldn't even count as cancer in the first place. Physicians, patients, and the general public must recognize that overdiagnosis is common and occurs more frequently with cancer screening, warns the NCI Commission Science articles in JAMA. In 2002 editorial in the Annals of Internal Medicine maintained the efficacy of mammograms for younger women is an open question. The debate is worth following closely, concluded the editor of the journal, because women are deciding about breast cancer screening, and it's our role to keep them informed as best as we can. Yet it is worth remembering that mammogram screening may lead to an overdiagnosis of breast cancer, that is, the detection of a tumor that would not have become clinically detectable in the patient's lifetime. Now, that was from the book, What If Medicine Disappeared by Gerald E. Markle. Cancer industry runs on scientific quackery and sleazery, fear-based sales tactics to recruit patients. That's the headline. Let me read that headline to you again. Cancer industry runs on scientific quackery and sleazily fear-based sales tactics to recruit patients. My friends, I do not have the time to get into the rest of this article. I am very sorry, but I think you get the gist of it. Okay, real quickly. You ready for this one? It turns out that last week the U.S. Bureau of Prisons unexpectedly banned bacon, pork chops, ham, and any other kind of pork from 3 meals served in federal prisons in 122 federal penitentiaries throughout the country. I find this very hard to believe that all of a sudden the prisoners don't want pork. I think we're just going ahead and taking care of the Muslim population in the prisons. I ask you, my friends, who doesn't like bacon? Who doesn't like bacon? I know people that don't eat pork but eat bacon. I know that sounds crazy, but it's true. I just find that this is basically, my friends, just appeasing the Muslim population of the prison system in this country. Okay. Listen, I just want to be real quick here because I have to get into why you have to pay your property taxes and that you do not own your land. But let's get back into right here real quick. This is from J.D. Hayes. Basically, he is talking about the collapse, the economic collapse blog. Over the last 60 days, we have witnessed the most significant global stock market decline since the fall of 2008, and yet most people still seem to think that it is just a temporary bump in the road and that the bull market will still resume. Let's take a look at the biggest 10 market declines in recent months as compiled by the Economic Collapse blog. The United States, the Dow Jones Industrial Average has plummeted more than 2,000 points since its trading zenith. In August, the DJIA declined by some 500 points on back-to-back trading days for the first time in the index's history. In the first time in its history. There has not been much unrest in the U.S. market since the fall of 2008. China, the Shanghai Composite Index has crumbled some 40% since hitting its peak earlier this year. At the same time, the Chinese economy is slowing dramatically, with Chinese manufacturing now at a 78-month low. Japan, Asia's second largest economy, has also taken a hit. The Nikkei average has undergone some violent moves recently, fallen some 3,000 points from its pinnacle earlier this year. In some, Japan markets resemble the overall Japanese economy's poor performance. It doesn't look like it would take much to tip Japan over the edge into a full-fledged financial collapse. The country is mired in debt, just like the United States. Of course it is. The very same bankers control Japan. Germany, nearly 1/4 of German stock values have been disseminated, and the crash there threatens to deepen. The Volkswagen scandal won't help. And by the way, my friends, there's more coming. There's going to be some Japanese companies that are going to come out and American companies that are going to come out, and they're all scrambling right now not to have to admit that this emission sitting, it wasn't just done by Volkswagen, it was done by a lot of them. And there is much trouble brewing at Germany's biggest bank. That would be Deutsche Bank. Great Britain. The UK has not avoided market damage. British stocks have nosedived some 16% from their peak. France stocks have declined 18%, and it has become clear that Paris is traveling down the same economic path as nearby Greece. Why wouldn't they be? Every country I've just mentioned are controlled by the very same bankers. Brazil, the largest country and economy in South America, is at the epicenter of that continent's 2015 financial crisis. As the U.S. dollar has steadily gained in recent months, other currencies have struggled to keep up, and that includes Brazil's currency, the real, which hit a 12-year low in July. Italy. Folks, every country I'm mentioning is controlled by, look at, different parts of the world, different private markets, if you would. Nothing historically in common, culturally in common. The only common denominator of all these countries failing is that they are controlled by the very same central bankers. Italy, part of the pigs, Portugal, Ireland, Italy, Greece, and Spain, all failing. This could be the next European economy to tank. Italian stocks recently have dropped off some 15%. India. Where else in Asia? The Indian economy is also taking a hit, with Indian stocks have fallen some 4,000%. Folks, I can go on, but I don't have the time. I am very, very sorry. I think you get the gist of it. And I'm going to have to be real quick about this because I got to get into the whole thing of why you have to pay your extortion fee. Anyway, this is a very well done article written by Michael Snyder. And what he basically gets into is that according to the latest data of this year, the world gross domestic product is down by 8.4%. One metric we have already seen in is a recession. As we can see in the chart 3, is another chart that's showing on the following page, the global GDP expressed in U.S. dollars is already negative to the tune of U.S. dollars 1/32 to or 3.4%. That is, listen to his words, we are already in a dollar recession. Now, there's a great article written here by the website Zero Hedge. Unfortunately, I do not have time to get into that, but I think I will save that for next week. Another article about the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Yes, we have been talking about this for years. Yes, it has been signed. No, you haven't had a chance to review it. Neither has your non-representing representatives had a chance to review it. It wasn't put together in the halls of Congress, my friends. It was put together at the corporate desk of major corporations throughout the world that are about to keep the little people even more little. And we will have to get into that, but the TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, has been signed. And of course, you have not got to read it. The countries on board so far: United States, Canada, Japan, Mexico, Australia, Brunei, Chile, Malaysia, New Zealand, Peru, Singapore, and Vietnam. Good thing we bombed them Vietnamese for all them years and lost all them lives. Millions of Vietnamese, hundreds of thousands of American soldiers, 58,000 don't come back, they're dead. Hundreds of thousands wounded, and hundreds of thousands that maintained the burden of war for the rest of their lives, affecting millions of American families. Okay, I don't have much time. Let's get into real quick, my friends, and I apologize, I wanted to spend more on this, why you have to pay your extortion fee. But I thought it would be interesting first. Let's read the definition of slave. Slave. Black's Fourth Law Dictionary. And then I'm going to read another one from Civil Code of Louisiana, 1838, which I thought would be interesting because we all know in 1838 there was slaves. So what is a slave, my friends, in law? A person who is wholly subject to the will of another, one who has no freedom of action, but whose person and services are wholly under the control of another. That's Black's Law. Civil Code of Louisiana, 1838. One who is under the power of a master and who belongs to him, so the master may sell and dispose of his person, of his industry, of his property, of his labor, without being able to do anything, have anything, or acquire anything, but must belong or permission from to his master. Now I ask you, are you a free man or are you a slave? And think about it sincerely. Can you travel without getting permission and paying a fee to do it? Nope. Can you labor without paying multiple fees and getting permission to do it? Nope. Do you have the right to choose what food you're going to eat through knowledge and understanding? Nope. Do you have the right to treat your children medically with deemed necessary for the well-being of that child? Nope. Do you have the right to build a house on property that you own without having to pay extortion fees every year, get permits to build that house, pay taxes for the materials, and pay an income tax on the laborers to international bankers? Nope. Do you have the right to even build a septic system so your family can relieve themselves without getting permission and paying fees to the master? Nope. Do you have the right to broadcast freely without having to go to a master agency called the FCC to put out information? Nope. Do you have a money system that is based on non-interest, debt-free medium of exchange and not have to pay debt entities and notes? A money system that is based on intrinsic valued money of gold or silver backing? Nope. So what are you? Are you a slave or are you a free man? And if you come to the obvious conclusion you are a slave, what are you going to do about it? Now, you think you own your land. I have about 8 minutes to sum this up. You do not own your land. You, my friends, go to your deed. You do not have a lloydial title. A lloydial title. You have certificate of title. A lloydial is Latin for absolute. You own it. No strings attached. A certificate of title, it means bearer use of. Someone is allowing you to use something of value. Your car, your land, your children. Your children have a birth certificate, don't they? That creates the bond. And we're not going to go there because I don't have the time to get into that. We're talking about your land, though, particularly your land. And you shouldn't call it your land, should you? Because if you look at that certificate of title, you will see that you are a tenant in common or a joint tenant. But either way, my friends, you are a tenant. You do not have a lloydial position. How did we lose a lloydial position? Let me read this to you verbatim. This is Senate Document 43 from the 73rd Congress, first session, March 9th. The session went on from March 9th to June 16th in 1933. Now, I remind you what took place in 1933. The corporation USA Inc. Now, I know really quick, I don't have the time to read the whole thing, but I'll just be real brief with you. The United States Inc. became a corporation in 1871 when they formed the Organic Act of 1871. It's really what the Civil War was about, and of course that ties into the Lieber Codes. And I know we did a couple of shows on the Lieber Codes many years ago, and we're going to get into that again in the future. And I'm sorry, folks, for taking up so much time on this other material, but there is so much going on. I just don't want to spend the short time we have with you reviewing this stuff, because we've done all this stuff. But we are excited because so many new viewers are watching our program that when I make a comment about something, I want you to have a foundational understanding of knowledge what I'm speaking of. So, if you wish to look this up, Senate Document 43, 73rd Congress, first session, March 9th through June 16th, 1933. Now, this is from the Congressional Record. Are you ready for this? The ownership of all property is in the state. Individual so-called ownership is only by virtue of government, i.e., law amounting to mere user of. And use must be in accordance with law and subordinate to the necessities of the state. I will read that again to you. Senate Document 43, 73rd Congress. The ownership of all property is in the state. Individual so-called ownership is only by virtue of government, i.e., law amounting to mere user of. And use must be in accordance with law and subordinate to the necessities of the state. This was announced publicly on March 6, 1933, by the Conference of Governors. So you must understand that your governor, no matter what state you're living in, has this knowledge and understands this fact. We are living, this is according to Bernard Broch, Knickerbocker Press in Albany, New York, 1918. We are living in a highly organized state of socialism. The state is all. The individual is of importance only as he contributes to the welfare of the state. His property is only his as the state does not need it. He must hold his life and his possessions at the call of the state. Let me read that again because I think it sums it up. So this is 1918. We are living in a highly organized state of socialism. The state is all. The individual is of importance only as he contributes to the welfare of the state. His property is only his as the state does not need it. He must hold his life and his possessions at the call of the state. Senate document number 43 from 1933, my friends, is when you lost ownership of what you perceive to be your land. My friends, this is all being done through deception, through fraud, through the power of the police state, through the mechanisms of the multitude, don't even know how many anymore, of alphabet agencies that interject in our lives on a daily basis for every aspect of our lives and your children's lives. It is time you educated yourself. It is time that you prepare. And I don't want to sound like an alarmist, but I am a student of history. If I am anything, I am a student of history. And I will tell you, as history is my barometer, we as a people cannot continue traveling the road that we are. We have gotten to the point that we are either going to educate ourselves and act upon knowledge, or we are going to succumb to total and complete bondage. As I just read to you, the definition of slave. Ask yourself from them two legal definitions of slave, are you a free man or are you a slave? My friends, as always, we are extremely thankful that you take the time from your busy day to view our program. We always close in asking you to seek truth, to obtain knowledge, to manifest kindness to your fellow man. And we always close in reminding you that your government is your responsibility. We thank you for watching.
Read between the lines. Got to read between the lines. Well, the truth is very simple, very hard to find.